My name is Alara Vance, and I am 32 years old. It feels like a lifetime ago, yet also just yesterday, that I packed 2 suitcases and a heart full of bruised hope, leaving the rain-swept streets of Portland behind. That was 7 years ago. I settled in Viridia City, a place vibrant with artistic energy and the quiet hum of ambition, and I never truly looked back. My work became my world. As a senior editor at Viridian Press, a small but respected independent publishing house, I found solace and purpose in the alchemy of words, in nurturing debut authors and bringing their fledgling stories to light. I wasn't merely competent. I poured my soul into the manuscripts, identifying glimmers of brilliance others might overlook, championing voices that deserved to be heard. It was a fulfilling existence, a carefully constructed sanctuary. But beyond the glow of my desk lamp and the hushed reverence of bookstores, to my family I was a faintly remembered ghost. We hadn't exchanged more than a handful of strained, perfunctory words since the year I left, 2016. So, when my phone, usually a quiet companion, vibrated on my worn oak nightstand one crisp October evening in 2023, the screen illuminating an unfamiliar number that somehow, deep down, felt familiar. A shiver of apprehension traced its way down my spine. I let it ring out, then a text message pinged. Alara, it's Clara. Your mom and dad, they've been asking for you. They want you to come home for the winter solstice gathering. Clara, my cousin. The one thread, however frayed, that still connected me to the tangled tapestry of my past. She was the only one who had my current number, a detail I'd shared with a hesitant plea for discretion. I sat on the edge of my bed, the faded floral quilt cool beneath my hands. The scent of old paper and Earl Grey tea, my usual evening companions, seemed to recede, replaced by a phantom aroma of damp earth and pine needles, the scent of my childhood home. Now, I whispered to the empty room, the question echoing the disbelief in my heart. After all this time? Clara's follow-up text was brief. They seem different. Serious, maybe? Just thought you should know. I didn't reply immediately. I switched off my phone and stared at the moonlit silhouette of the ancient maple tree outside my window. Its branches, gnarled and reaching, were a familiar comfort, a steadfast presence in my carefully curated life. But tonight, they seemed to beckon me towards a path I thought I'd long since abandoned. Memories, unbidden and potent, began to surface like forgotten photographs discovered in a dusty attic. The constant, gnawing feeling of being an afterthought, a pale shadow in the bright glow of my older brother, Ethan. I remembered, with a clarity that still stung, being 13, curled small in a large, impersonal armchair in Dr. Albright's dimly lit office. My knees were drawn to my chest, a fragile shield. Dr. Albright, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle voice, had looked at my parents, her expression carefully neutral. Alara's anxieties, she'd said, her words soft but precise, don't primarily stem from a fear of being alone. They seem to arise from a feeling of being unseen, of being overlooked within the family dynamic. My mother, her posture stiffening almost imperceptibly, had offered a brittle smile. Oh, we adore both our children equally, Doctor. Ethan is just more outgoing, you know how boys can be. But her eyes, even then, hadn't quite met mine, and I'd known, with the painful certainty of a child who scrutinizes every nuance, that her words were a carefully constructed facade. Ethan was the sun around which our family revolved. The charming athlete, the natural leader, the boy destined for great things. His 16th birthday brought a gleaming, second-hand sedan, a symbol of his burgeoning independence, celebrated with a boisterous family party. My own milestones were often marked by well-intentioned but ill-fitting hand-me-downs from distant relatives, or a book token presented with a distracted pat on the head. Even at solstice, the one time of year meant for warmth and togetherness, Ethan's presents were always the centerpiece, brightly wrapped and eagerly anticipated. Mine felt like polite additions, chosen with a sense of obligation rather than genuine insight into the quiet girl who lost herself in stories. And yet, this year, after 7 years of near silence, they were calling me back. A fragile, tentative olive branch extended across a chasm of unspoken hurts. And I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that they had absolutely no idea who I had become, the woman I had painstakingly, quietly, built from the fragments of the girl they had barely known. Family gatherings, in the landscape of my memory, were fraught with a low-level hum of anxiety. Ethan, effortlessly charismatic, would hold court, his laughter booming, his stories captivating the assembled aunts, uncles, and cousins. I, in contrast, would retreat into the periphery, feeling as substantial as a wisp of smoke, a piece of furniture one navigates around without a second glance. It was in those quiet, shadowed corners that my true self began to stir, seeking refuge not in the noisy approval of others, but in the silent companionship of words. My escape hatch wasn't a digital portal, but the worn spines of books and the inviting blankness of a page. It began with a faded, typewritten notice pinned to the corkboard in the school library, the Quill and Scroll Society, for lovers of literature and aspiring wordsmiths. Mrs. Davison's classroom, Tuesdays after school. I attended that first meeting with a tremor of nervous anticipation, clutching a dog-eared copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. And then I never missed a session. It was there, amidst the scent of floor polish and old paper, surrounded by other quiet souls, that I first felt a sense of belonging, a feeling of being truly seen. Not for my athletic prowess or social grace, but for the thoughts I dared to pen, the worlds I tentatively began to build with words. Mrs. Davison, with her silver hair and eyes that crinkled at the corners when she smiled, became my mentor. She didn't just teach us about sonnets and similes, she taught us the power of narrative, the courage it took to share one's voice. We'd dissect classic novels, share our own hesitant poems and short stories, offer gentle critiques, and find a profound connection in our shared passion. I even self-published a small chapbook of poetry, printed on the school's old mimeograph machine, its inky imperfections a testament to a burgeoning dream. One afternoon, as sunlight streamed through the dusty classroom windows, Mrs. Davison kept me back. "Alara," she said, her voice warm, "you have a rare gift for understanding the human heart, and an even rarer ability to translate it onto the page. Don't ever let anyone or anything diminish that light within you." Her words were a balm, a quiet affirmation that I carried with me like a precious talisman. By 17, the year Ethan was already flourishing at Auden University, a prestigious institution on the East Coast, his path smoothed by my parents' unwavering financial and emotional support. I had meticulously crafted my own plan. I'd researched liberal arts colleges far from Portland, places known for their strong writing programs. I applied in secret, hoarding my application fees from babysitting money, fueled by a quiet determination to write my own story, chapter by chapter, on my own terms. Then came that fateful Thanksgiving dinner, a memory etched in my mind with a particular kind of painful clarity. The air was thick with the aroma of roast turkey and my mother's famous pecan pie. My father, beaming with pride, raised his glass. "To Ethan," he announced, his voice resonating with paternal pride. "Doing us proud at Auden, blazing a trail. Cheers, son." A chorus of cheers echoed around the table. My mother then added, her gaze briefly, almost apologetically, flicking towards me, "And as for Alara, well, we're encouraging her to explore more practical avenues. Perhaps some vocational training, something to secure a steady income." Before I could even process the familiar sting, my Uncle Marcus, always quick with a jest, chimed in, "Hey, Alara, the Rose City Diner is always looking for reliable waitstaff. Good tips, honest work." The table erupted in laughter, a wave of amusement that washed over me, cold and isolating. My parents chuckled along, a sound that felt like a tiny, sharp betrayal. I didn't laugh. I simply looked down at my plate, the festive meal suddenly tasteless. What none of them knew, what I held close like a secret ember, was the acceptance letter tucked safely in my drawer, a full scholarship to Hawthorne College in Viridia City, renowned for its creative writing program. Tuition, board, even a small stipend for books, all of it secured by my own efforts, my own words. A few weeks later, with a quiet resolve that surprised even myself, I packed my life into 2 worn suitcases. I took a bus to Viridia City, the rhythmic hum of the tires on the highway a lullaby to my anxious, hopeful heart. I found a tiny room in a shared student house near Hawthorne, the air perpetually smelling of instant coffee and ambition. I worked part-time at the Wandering Quill, a charmingly cluttered independent bookstore, shelving books and breathing in the comforting scent of stories waiting to be discovered. I poured myself into my studies, graduated with honors, and, through a connection made at the bookstore, landed an internship at Viridian Press. It wasn't glamorous, mostly fetching coffee and proofreading manuscripts, but I was in the world I'd always dreamed of. Years passed, marked by the changing seasons outside my small office window and the steady accumulation of knowledge and experience. I climbed the ladder at Viridian, from intern to editorial assistant, then to associate editor, and finally, senior editor. My tiny student room gave way to a modest but sunny 1-bedroom apartment in the Willow Creek neighborhood, a place with tree-lined streets and a strong sense of community. Just last spring, a manuscript had landed on my desk, a debut novel by an unknown author, raw and unconventional. Something about the voice, the unapologetic honesty, resonated deeply. I championed it fiercely, staying late, working through weekends, believing in its power. The novel, Echoes in the Silence, became an unexpected bestseller. My share of the royalties, a modest but significant sum, felt like a validation, not just of my editorial instincts, but of the quiet path I had chosen. It was enough for a down payment. With the help of a kind, patient realtor named Sarah, I found it, a charming, semi-detached Victorian house in Willow Creek, a little worn around the edges, but with good bones and a small, overgrown garden. 2 bedrooms, a cozy living room with a fireplace, and a sun-drenched nook perfect for a writing desk. At 31, a year before the solstice invitation arrived, I became a homeowner. 2 weeks before that fateful call from Clara, I'd hosted a small housewarming. Not a grand affair, just my closest friends, Chloe, a fellow editor from a rival press who understood the peculiar madness of our profession, Mark, a musician I'd met at a local open mic night, and old Mrs. Henderson from the Wandering Quill, who still sent me recommendations. We sat on mismatched cushions on the newly polished wooden floor, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, sharing a simple vegetarian curry and a bottle of surprisingly good organic wine. Chloe had raised her glass, her eyes sparkling. To Alara, she'd said, her voice warm, who taught us all that the quietest voices often have the most profound things to say. And to this beautiful home, a testament to her strength and her beautiful heart. We'd clinked our paper cups, laughter echoing in the sparsely furnished rooms. I'd smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. But even then, a small, unbidden thought had flickered. What would my family think? The question was academic, of course. They didn't even know I owned a house. Now, standing at the precipice of returning, a strange mix of apprehension and a new, unfamiliar resolve settled within me. I was going home. But this time, I wasn't the invisible girl, shrinking in the shadows. This time, I was returning as Alara Vance, a woman who knew her own story, who understood her own worth, chapter and verse. The week before the solstice, I took a few days off work. I carefully selected gifts, not extravagant, but thoughtful, a rare first edition for my father, who had once, long ago, shared a love of history with me, a beautifully crafted silk scarf for my mother, in a shade of blue I remembered her admiring, a set of artisanal woodworking tools for Ethan, recalling a brief childhood fascination. For Clara, a signed copy of Echoes in the Silence. I packed them with care, each fold a silent wish for. I wasn't sure what. Peace, perhaps. Understanding. Or maybe just a moment of genuine connection. The drive to Portland was a journey back in time. The familiar landscape of the Pacific Northwest unfolded outside my car window. Towering pines, mist-shrouded hills, the ever-present drizzle that felt like a homecoming embrace. As I neared Rosewood Heights, the suburban enclave of my youth, a knot tightened in my stomach. The houses, once symbols of comfortable familiarity, now seemed to press in on me, whispering forgotten anxieties. My childhood home looked tired. The cheerful yellow paint I remembered was faded and peeling in places. The once meticulously kept rose bushes were overgrown, and the porch light, a welcoming beacon in my distant memories, flickered erratically, like a fading pulse. I took a deep breath, the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves filling my lungs, and rang the doorbell. My hand, I noticed with a detached sort of surprise, was trembling. Footsteps, slow and slightly shuffling, approached from within. The door creaked open, a sound unchanged by the years. My mother stood there, her hair grayer than I remembered, her face etched with fine lines I hadn't seen before. She blinked, her eyes, the same shade of hazel as mine, widening slightly. Alara. A beat of silence, then, my goodness, it really is you. She gave me a brief, almost tentative hug, her body stiff against mine. You look, well, different. Inside, the house enveloped me in a familiar, almost suffocating wave of sensations. The faint, lingering scent of my father's pipe tobacco, the musty aroma of old wood and forgotten things, and the cloying sweetness of the dried potpourri my mother always kept in a crystal bowl on the hall table. The living room, just as I remembered it, only more cluttered, was filled with the low hum of conversation. As I stepped in, the voices faltered, then ceased altogether. A dozen pairs of eyes, belonging to aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't seen in years, turned towards me. Well, look who decided to grace us with her presence, a voice I recognized as my Aunt Moira muttered, not quite under her breath. Is that a pantsuit? Another cousin whispered, loud enough for me to hear. I glanced down at my attire, simple, tailored charcoal gray trousers and a soft cashmere sweater in a muted teal. Understated elegance, I'd thought. Clearly, not the festive attire they'd expected, or perhaps simply not Ethan's girlfriend's style. Then Ethan emerged from the kitchen, a proprietary air about him, his arm around a young woman with bright, expectant eyes and a gently rounded belly. Everyone, he announced, his voice booming with its customary confidence. This is Olivia, my wonderful wife. He then gestured towards her stomach with a flourish. And you're all looking at your future niece or nephew. A chorus of congratulations rippled through the room. That's wonderful news, Ethan, Olivia, I said, offering a genuine smile. It was lovely news. Ethan's gaze met mine, a smirk playing on his lips. Alara. Still, scribbling away in some dusty corner, are we? Laughter, polite but pointed, followed his remark. The familiar heat rose in my cheeks, but I met his gaze steadily. I work in publishing, Ethan, I replied, my voice calm, even. I help bring stories to life. He raised an eyebrow, a dismissive gesture. Publishing, huh? Like proofreading pamphlets or something? He turned to Olivia, a conspiratorial wink. Alara was always the artistic one. Probably holed up in some little attic room somewhere, lost in her books. I offered a faint, non-committal smile. Something like that, I murmured, choosing not to elaborate, not yet. My mother clapped her hands together, a brittle, cheerful sound. Dinner will be ready soon, everyone. Alara, dear, you can just put your bag in the, well, Ethan's using your old room as his home office now, you see, for his new consultancy venture. So, the sofa in the den will have to do. I'm sure you don't mind. Of course he was. Of course I would be. The den sofa, lumpy and smelling faintly of mothballs, had been my designated sleeping spot on the rare occasions I'd stayed over during my college years. Some things, it seemed, never changed. The evening unfolded with a slow, agonizing predictability, a symphony of subtle condescensions and patronizing remarks. Aunt Maura, her eyes sharp and appraising, cornered me by the wilting poinsettia display. "So, Elara," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "Ethan tells us he's launching a very innovative business. Such a go-getter, that boy. Always aiming high. And you're still with the books, are you? It's nice to have a hobby, I suppose." "It's my career, Aunt Maura," I said, keeping my tone light. "I'm a senior editor." She blinked, as if the words didn't quite compute. "Oh, well, that's interesting. Someone has to do the quiet work, I'd guess." Later, as I offered to help in the kitchen, Uncle Marcus leaned in, his breath smelling of sherry. "You know, Elara," he said, with a conspiratorial nudge, "that offer at the Rose City Diner might still be open. Not glamorous, but it's steady. Honest. And you meet all sorts." "Thank you, Uncle Marcus," I said, managing a polite smile. "But I'm quite happy where I am." At dinner, I was, as expected, seated at the far end of the long dining table, near the swinging door to the kitchen, a forgotten island in the boisterous sea of family. Ethan, naturally, occupied the seat of honor next to my father, holding forth about his new venture. "It's a paradigm shift in boutique consultancy," he declared, his voice filled with fervor, gesturing expansively with his fork. "We're going to revolutionize personalized wealth management for a new generation of entrepreneurs. All we need is the initial seed capital to get the infrastructure in place and hit the ground running." "And how much are we talking about, son?" my father asked, his expression a mixture of pride and cautious concern. "Oh, a modest 150,000 should get us to series of funding," Ethan replied, with an air of casual confidence that made my stomach churn. It sounded like every half-baked, over-leveraged business plan I'd ever heard pitched by hopefuls trying to get a book deal for their revolutionary ideas. I discreetly sipped my water, the clinking of cutlery and the murmur of impressed relatives washing over me. "Well," my mother said, reaching over to pat Ethan's hand, her eyes shining with maternal devotion. "We'll find a way. Family helps family, always." Her gaze flickered towards me for a fleeting second, unreadable, before returning to her favored son. After the rich food and even richer pronouncements, as the evening began to wind down, my mother pressed a faded, slightly musty-smelling quilt into my arms. "Here you are, dear. For the den sofa. I hope you'll be comfortable enough." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Solstice morning dawned gray and damp, the Portland sky weeping a soft, persistent drizzle. The house was filled with the sounds of forced cheerfulness and the rustle of wrapping paper. Ethan and Olivia descended the stairs like visiting royalty, their arms already laden with gifts they'd exchanged in the privacy of my old room. They tore into their presents from the family with an enthusiasm that felt almost performative. Mine, the woodworking tools and the scarf, were met with polite exclamations. "Oh, Elara, this is very thoughtful," my mother said, holding up the silk scarf, her smile a little too bright. Then it was ostensibly my turn. A small, awkward silence fell. My mother looked flustered, her gaze darting between me and the dwindling pile of presents under the solstice tree, which seemed to consist mainly of items for Ethan and Olivia and the impending baby. "Oh, dear," she murmured, her hand flying to her mouth in a gesture of exaggerated dismay. "Elara, sweetie, it seems in all the excitement about the baby and Ethan's new business, we it must have slipped our minds." Ethan let out a short, sharp bark of laughter. "Classic. Just like when we were kids. Elara? Don't tell me you're going to cry this time." He smirked, a cruel, familiar expression. "You're a grown woman now, after all." A profound stillness settled over me. It wasn't anger, not exactly. Nor was it the familiar sting of sadness that had been my childhood companion. It was something else. A quiet, unshakable clarity. The final piece of a puzzle I hadn't even realized I was solving, slotting into place with a gentle, definitive click. I met Ethan's taunting gaze, then my mother's flustered one, and finally my father's averted eyes. "No, Ethan," I said, my voice surprisingly even, calm. "I'm not going to cry." I reached into my handbag, which I'd kept by my side on the lumpy den sofa all night. "Actually," I continued, my fingers closing around the cool metal, "I bought myself a rather wonderful gift this year." I pulled out a small, antique silver keychain. Attached to it were two keys, one old and ornate, the other new and shiny. I held them up, the silver catching the dim morning light. My mother frowned, her brow furrowed in confusion. "Keys? What on earth are those for, dear?" "These," I said, my voice clear and steady, a quiet counterpoint to the earlier boisterousness, "are the keys to my house. My home in Viridia City. I closed on it just over a year ago." A different kind of silence descended upon the room, heavier, more profound than before. It was the silence of dropped masks, of stunned comprehension. My father blinked, his mouth slightly agape. You bought a house, Alara?" "Yes," I said. "With the earnings from my work." Viridian Press recently published a debut novel I championed. It became a bestseller. My share of the royalties, after taxes, was quite substantial. Around 90,000. You could have heard a pin drop on the worn carpet. Ethan's smirk had vanished, replaced by an expression of slack-jawed disbelief. Olivia's eyes were wide with unconcealed astonishment. My mother and father simply stared, as if I had suddenly sprouted wings and announced my intention to fly to the moon. $90,000, my mother finally managed, her voice a reedy whisper, pitching upwards in disbelief. What kind of editing job pays bonuses like that?" "I told you, Mother," I said, my voice still calm, though a quiet strength I hadn't known I possessed was now coursing through me. "I'm a senior editor at a respected publishing house. I acquire and develop manuscripts. I help shape careers. It's a demanding, but rewarding, profession." My father leaned forward, his earlier joviality completely gone, replaced by an intense, almost rapacious curiosity. "Alara, how long have you been earning this kind of money?" "My salary has been comfortable for several years now, Dad," I replied. The bonus for echoes in the silence was exceptional, of course, but my career has been steadily progressing since I graduated from Hawthorne. It was as if a switch had been flipped. My mother suddenly rose, her face wreathed in a brilliant, saccharine smile. "Alara, sweetheart, why on earth didn't you tell us any of this? We're so incredibly proud of you. A house! And such success!" She rushed towards me, attempting an embrace that felt more like an appropriation than affection. My father, recovering quickly, chimed in, his voice booming with newfound enthusiasm. "Ethan, did you hear that? Your sister. A bestseller. Working with, well, with important authors, I imagine." Ethan's jaw was tight, his earlier arrogance deflated. Olivia was whispering something urgently in his ear, her eyes darting between me and my brother. My mother perched on the arm of the sofa beside me, her hand gripping my arm a little too tightly. "So, this house of yours, darling. Tell us all about it. How many bedrooms? Is it nice?" "It's a Victorian semi-detached," I said, gently extricating my arm. 2 bedrooms, a lovely little garden. It's in Willow Creek, a very pleasant neighborhood, quite close to Viridian Press." Her face lit up. "Willow Creek. Oh, we simply must come and visit. We could drive down after the new year. Families should be together, shouldn't they? Especially to celebrate such wonderful achievements." I almost laughed then, a raw, incredulous sound. Family. After 7 years of near silence, suddenly, family should stick together. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. "Actually," I said, rising to my feet, the quilt my mother had given me for the sofa falling unheeded to the floor. "I have a rather long drive back to Viridia City. I should probably get going soon." My mother's smile faltered. "But, Alara, Well, you just told us your wonderful news. Stay for lunch, at least. We haven't even had a chance to properly talk about your career, your house. My father nodded vigorously. Yes, yes, stay, Alara. We have so much to catch up on. As I went to the den to retrieve my small overnight bag, I could hear their voices, hushed but urgent, a rapid-fire exchange of whispers from the living room. When I returned, suitcase in hand, they were waiting for me by the front door, their faces arranged in expressions of eager, almost desperate, anticipation. Those strained smiles, so full of unspoken expectation, set off a familiar alarm bell in my soul. Alara, dear, my father began, stepping forward, his hand outstretched as if to detain me. Before you rush off, we were just discussing Ethan's business venture. As you heard, he requires a bit of liquid capital to get things off the ground. And given your recent good fortune, Ethan stepped up beside him, his earlier smirk replaced by an ingratiating smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It's a fantastic opportunity, Alara. A ground floor investment. You'd be a key partner. Think of the returns. How much are you looking for? I asked, my voice flat, devoid of the emotion that churned within me. Just that 150,000, Ethan said, with a dismissive wave of his hand. Pocket change for someone with your kind of success, right? Olivia nodded enthusiastically beside him. I looked at them then. Truly looked at them. My parents, who had once chuckled dismissively at the thought of me finding steady work. My brother, who had spent a lifetime treating me as an amusing afterthought, a minor character in his grand narrative. And his wife, a newcomer to this family drama, already playing her part with an unnerving alacrity. A deep, quiet sigh escaped me. No, I said, the single word falling into the charged silence like a stone into a still pond. The smiles vanished instantly. No? My mother repeated, her voice sharp, incredulous. What do you mean, no? I said, meeting her gaze, then Ethan's, then my father's, that I will not be investing in Ethan's venture. I will not be giving you any money. But we're family, Alara. My father sputtered, as if the word itself were a magical incantation capable of bending my will. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The strength I felt came from a place far deeper than anger. Family, I repeated softly. Where was this family when I was navigating college applications alone, while Ethan's path to Auden was paved with your unwavering support? Where was family when I was working 2 part-time jobs to afford textbooks, because my hobby of writing wasn't deemed worthy of the investment you so readily made in Ethan's future? I paused, letting my words hang in the air. Where was this concern when I was told, year after year, in subtle and not-so-subtle ways, that my dreams were impractical, my ambitions secondary? That was different, Alara. My mother protested, her face flushing. We didn't have as much back then. Things were tighter. You had enough for Ethan, I stated, simply, without accusation, just fact. You had enough for his tuition, his car, his trips abroad. You had enough for his confidence. Ethan showed such promise, she retorted. Then, as if realizing her misstep, hastily added, we just thought a more practical path, direct work experience, would be better for your temperament, dear. I picked up my handbag. I should leave. The weather looks like it might turn. You ungrateful, selfish girl. Ethan suddenly exploded, his face contorted with rage. After everything this family has done for you. Given you. I turned at the door, my hand on the cool brass knob. Done for me, Ethan? I asked, my voice still quiet, but carrying a new resonance. You mean raised me? Clothed me? Fed me? That's called parenting. It's a responsibility, not a transaction that indebts a child for life. And throughout that upbringing, you all made it abundantly clear, in countless ways, that I was an inconvenience. A disappointment. Someone who didn't quite fit the narrative you wanted for our family. I opened the door. The cool, damp air felt like a release. They followed me onto the porch, their protests and accusations tumbling out, a torrent of belated, self-serving indignation. "You'll regret this, Ilara," my mother cried, her voice cracking. "You'll be all alone with your money and your books." I paused on the top step, then turned to face them one last time. A gentle rain had begun to fall, misting my face, washing away the stifling atmosphere of the house. "No, Mother," I said, and the certainty in my voice was a surprise even to me. "I don't think I will." I thought of my little Victorian house in Willow Creek, filled with sunlight and the scent of old paper. I thought of Chloe and Mark and Mrs. Henderson. I thought of Liam, a kind architect I'd recently started seeing, a man whose gentle humor and respect for boundaries felt like a balm to old wounds. I'm not alone. I've built a life for myself. A good life. And I did it without any of this. I gestured vaguely at the house, at them. "I wish you all well." And with that, I walked down the porch steps, got into my car, and drove away, the image of their stunned, angry faces receding in my rearview mirror until they were swallowed by the rain and the gathering twilight. The drive back to Viridia City was long, but my heart felt strangely light. The rain eventually stopped, and as I crossed the state line, the moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting a silvery glow on the highway ahead. I didn't block their numbers. I simply muted the notifications. Let them rage, let them lament. Their voices could no longer wound me. Back in my own home, the scent of lemon polish and old books welcomed me. I made a cup of chamomile tea, curled up in my favorite armchair by the fireplace, and opened a new manuscript. The words on the page were a comfort, a reminder of the world I had chosen, the world I had built. A few days later, a hesitant text arrived from Clara. "Things are explosive here. Mom said your mother called everyone. They're painting a very dramatic picture. Are you okay, Ilara?" I smiled. "I'm more than okay, Clara. I'm finally free. Thank you for being the one who always saw me." Her reply was swift, "Always. Let me know when you're free for coffee." My treat. The solstice had indeed been a turning point, but not in the way my family had hoped. It was the moment I fully stepped into my own story, the author of my own life. There would be more chapters, I knew, filled with challenges and joys, sorrows and triumphs. Perhaps, one day, far in the future, a different kind of conversation with my family might be possible, one built on a foundation of mutual respect rather than obligation and expectation. Or perhaps not. Either way, I was at peace. I had found my voice, and it was strong and clear, and it was, finally, wonderfully, irrevocably, my own. And that, I realized, was the greatest gift of all. The solstice had passed, but a new season, in my heart, had just begun.